and Thatcherite David Starky has said on Newsnight on the BBC that whites have become black.
Do you think this has been a profound cultural shift this week, David Starky?
Not this week. And whether this week is a huge incident, I'm sorry, I'm a historian, will only know in the future. Only the outcome will determine. But I think what this week has shown is that profound changes have happened. The two things about these riots. The first is, in one sense, they're completely superficial. Somebody brilliantly put it there, it's shopping with violence. It's merely extended commercialism. I think, for me, the key image was the woman coolly trying on a pair of trainers outside a looted shop. So that's one aspect of it. The other, though, I think there has been a profound cultural change. I've just been rereading Enoch Powell, The Rivers of Blood speech. His prophecy was absolutely right in one sense. The Tiber didn't foam with blood, but flames lambent wrapped round Tottenham and wrapped round Clapham. But it wasn't intercommunal violence. This is where he was completely wrong. What's happened is that a substantial section of the chavs that you wrote about have become black. The whites have become black. A particular sort of violent, destructive, nihilistic gangster culture has become the fashion. And black and white, boy and girl, operate in this language together. This language which is wholly false, which is a Jamaican patois that's been intruded in England. And this is why so many of us have this sense of literally a foreign country.
In that speech, Enoch Powell talked about 15 or 20 years' time, the black man having the whip hand over the white man.
That's not true. What's happened is black culture. This is the enormously important thing. It's not skin colour, it's cultural. Listen to David Lammy, an archetypical, successful black man. If you turned the screen off so you were listening to him on radio, you'd think he was white. You know,
David,
So that's the accusation made by David Starky. And you would say, well, there's a certain amount of logic being used there. So I struggle with this point, but I have to say, I have to agree with my enemy in some respects. People have abandoned English culture on a major level, and have adopted a kind of culture which is a synthesis of what they perceive black culture to be. So I'm putting it in a far more eloquent way than David Starky's blunt "whites have become black" statement. And he is putting it out there as a kind of political trap, because, of course, if you agree with him completely, then you're going to fall into what the conclusions that he's pointing to. But let's take a look at who David Starky is. David Starky is an ultra-conservative. He is a Thatcherite. So he's only being hypocritical in the fact that he's talking about the savagery in... That's the word I would use, of the riots. His political and cultural backgrounds in terms of his political philosophy is based solely on self-interest. And what were the rioters doing? They were using solely self-interest. But that means that it brings us to another point of what is irrationality. If the rioters believe that they can get away with it because the bankers have got away with it, because other people have got away with it, they're simply throwing more petrol on a fire and then throwing themselves in after it. So we have to be very careful about statements such as that, whites have become black statements, because we're not talking about a generalisation of black people or white people. We're talking about a particular brand of culture which is an anti-culture. Street culture is an aberrant culture, because culture is designed to inculcate certain values because they solve problems. Now, English culture developed from a point of warfare as a cohesive thing to keep people together in communities and into a nation, to solve the problem of warfare, both internally and externally. from invasion. And it's been quite successful in doing that. We have had probably about 15 major invasions of Britain or by non-English people, such as the Normans, the Vikings, the French, of course, and non-English speaking people. And there's been over 172 civil wars in England's history. But overall, we live in a time where there's less civil strife than we've ever had before, even more than in the pre-1945 order of things, from which the political philosophy of David Starky hails, when most of the country was run by ultra-conservative Freemasons, and the university system swept that away and replaced that ultra-conservatism, which was extremely violent and oppressive, with social democracy, which has a balance of liberty and equality and democracy under the rule of law. So this led on from the Rhodes and Milner group, who got involved with South Africa, caused the Boer War, and then their philosophy was passed on through the generations until it reached Margaret Thatcher, and she got in, and then we have what we've got today. So it's not completely gone, but it is like a mirror to them. They see in their reflection the savagery of the riots, and they don't like the picture that comes back at them. You know, I'm talking about ultra-conservatives here. But the problem of Anglicisation of English culture is an extremely important problem, and David Starky, I will give him credit for that, has pointed to a fact that many of us have overlooked. The perception through media and music of a certain kind of black street culture by white people, and that some people are stupid enough to look at Jamaican gangsters and then think, yeah, I could be one of those people even though I'm white, and I'm English and I come from a different system. Well, that is obviously stupidity on their part, and they're not part of that culture, they don't understand it, and they don't take any of the positive things from that culture, they just take their own perception. So it's like an inverse racism to themselves and to the Jamaican culture which they're trying to emulate. They're trying to melt. It's like with the French and the Vikings in Normandy, though they didn't, when the two cultures merged together to form the Normans didn't fit into either culture, and so their only option was to expand. And we're seeing that in street gangs in England, that they do not fit into either the black or white cultures of where there is positive outcomes, but they're only seeking to expand their own culture and cause problems for both cultures, both English and black culture, which of course you have to subdivide into Caribbean and Jamaican and African, and those two cultures don't get on together because of course the Africans sold the Jamaicans into the slave trade, or the people who would become the Jamaicans. There's also a key point about education. In terms of Marxist educational ideas, nations are only the products of education. They have no biological or racial natural structure or in nature. I disagree with that. I believe that the English are a Nordic and Celtic and Roman people, but the values of English culture, of a certain kind of honour, of a certain kind of civility, have all been lost because they've been taken out of the educational system by Marxists and by the self-interest of ultra-conservatives who tried to tell us that capitalism could be blue in tooth and claw. So you cannot blame anyone else but the rioters themselves, but there are cultural factors, and this was just shopping with violence. If you destroy and do not build and do not replace what you've destroyed, you should not be a citizen, you should be deported.